The old man's 4 children had not returned home for a long time, so he had no choice but to travel across the United States to visit each of them and see whether they were truly happy. Every time he found one of his children, he would ask, "You happy?" When he heard his daughter say she was happy, his face lit up with joy he could not hide. So when he came to his eldest son, he also hoped that his son was living happily.
Happy? Yeah. I get paid to bang a big loud drum all day. Of course I'm happy.
But this time, Frank noticed something unusual in his son's eyes, because both his son and his daughter had shown a brief hesitation before answering, which made Frank realize they were lying. They were not living happily at all. He could not understand why his children chose to deceive him. In order to resolve the doubt in his heart, Frank arranged with his 4 children to reunite on Thanksgiving. But on Thanksgiving night, a sudden phone call shattered all his excitement. It was his eldest daughter calling, saying that her work was too busy and she would not be able to come. Although Frank felt regret, he still had 3 other children he could meet. Yet when he played the voicemail messages, he received news from the others as well.
Dad, hi, I can't stop right now. I'm back on stage in a few minutes. The producers are flying in from Paris and want to see the original cast, so I just can't get away this weekend. I'm sorry, I know I haven't been home since the funeral, but I'm trying, I promise. I love you, I'm thinking...
One by one, each child said they could not come home, all using work as the reason. As a father, Frank felt a mix of emotions. His children were always busy, and since his wife had passed away months earlier, none of them had returned home after her funeral. When she was alive, his wife was the bridge between the children and him. The children would tell her everything, but ever since she was gone, they no longer contacted him on their own, and this distance cut straight into his heart. Frank wanted to know whether his children were truly living well, and this question lingered in his mind without rest. So that day, he made a bold decision. He would travel across the country to visit each of his children in their different cities. At the same time, in order to surprise them, he chose not to notify anyone in advance. He prepared 4 letters for them, packed his luggage, took enough medicine with him, and after taking one last look at the home where he had lived for 70 years, he set off on his journey. He did not know how far he could go because before retiring, he had been a worker wrapping protective coating around electrical cables, and years of heavy labor had left him with pulmonary fibrosis. When the doctor heard that Frank wanted to travel long distances, he patiently advised him to rest quietly at home, stressing especially that he must not take a plane since the strain of travel could put his life at risk at any moment. But Frank could not follow the doctor's advice because his longing for his children outweighed his concern for his own life. Even so, he avoided flying and chose instead the steadier option of traveling by train. On the train, whenever he thought about reuniting with his children, his heart filled with excitement and expectation. Frank could not resist showing the other passengers photos of his children. His eldest son Robert was a music conductor, his younger son David was a painter, his younger daughter Rosie was a famous dancer, and his eldest daughter Amy was an executive at a company. Every time he talked about them, Frank's face beamed with pride. He was very satisfied with the success of his children. But when he spoke about himself, his tone became modest. He said he had no great skills in life. As a cable wrapper, he could only manage to cover 1,000 feet of wire in a week. But by wrapping wires without pause, in 30 years, he had coated millions of feet. And with that income, he had raised 4 children into accomplished adults. For Frank, his children were like the cables, and he himself was the protective coating shielding them from the wind and rain. After a long day of travel, he finally arrived at his younger son's apartment, planning to give David a surprise, but reality did not go as he had hoped. Frank pressed the doorbell for a long time until his finger grew stiff, but no sound came in return. He guessed his son must have gone out, so he sat on the steps by the door to wait. Time passed. Birds flew back to their nests. The streetlights grew bright. But still, David did not return home. Instead, a young woman approached.
You want to see my leg?
Want to see mine?
Frank's humorous and witty refusal made the young woman laugh and walk away. The long wait gradually drained Frank's strength, and he could no longer stay awake, falling into a deep sleep. Suddenly, a taxi stopped in front of him, and Frank woke instantly, thinking it must be his son coming home. But when he looked closer, it was only 2 kids coming back late from playing. Exhausted and disappointed, Frank could only leave quietly with a heavy heart. The midnight streets were empty, and only one tired old man walked slowly forward. His shadow looked very lonely. But as he passed an art gallery, an abstract painting in the window caught his eye. The lines and colors felt deeply familiar to him. Sure enough, in the corner was his son's signature. In that moment, he seemed to see young David riding his bike toward him, and he could hear the words he used to say to his son long ago.
What are you going to be?
An artist.
That's right, an artist. So you're going to work hard?
Yes, Dad.
You're going to make me proud?
Looking at the painting, Frank felt some comfort. Perhaps his son had already become successful. Maybe he had gone somewhere else to celebrate tonight. So Frank did not feel sad. After all, this visit was unannounced. Later, he went into a 24-hour diner, watching the television news about a typhoon while chatting with another elderly man nearby. This man, too, was troubled by family issues. Frank did not know why the man suddenly turned from the typhoon to talking about his children.
I'm 94. I have 3 children, 6 grandchildren. They don't need anybody. They're busy. They're too busy to talk to me. I can make an appointment.
But this sudden resonance felt like a thorn lodged in his throat, making it hard to swallow. He also noticed the lonely gaze of another old man sitting in the corner, and a wave of sour sadness welled up inside him. Since when had holidays meant to bring people together become days that left people feeling even more alone? The next morning, Frank returned once again to David's door and rang the bell, but still no one answered. This time, however, he met a neighbor coming back outside. Breathing heavily, Frank carried his heavy luggage up the stairs with great effort, and when he reached David's door, he knocked with hope in his heart. At that moment, his heart seemed to stop beating, but after a long wait, the only response he received was the silence of the room. That door was like an unbridgeable chasm, separating him from his son. Frank's expectations turned into deep disappointment. He had no idea where David had gone, nor did he know if he was safe, so he could only leave the letter he had prepared for him, sliding it through the crack of the door, hoping his son would see it when he returned. After that, Frank boarded a bus and began heading to his next destination, to visit his eldest daughter, Amy. On the bus, he saw all kinds of people. Some carried the joy of going home, while others hid the fatigue of their journey. When night finally fell, he arrived at an inn, where he spent a brief but warm evening. Late at night, because of his medication, he found it difficult to fall asleep, so he went down to the inn's restaurant to experience a different kind of lonely life. After several days of bumpy travel, Frank finally arrived at his eldest daughter's home, pressing the doorbell with a restless heart. This time, his hope was not in vain. His grandson opened the door, his young face full of surprise, clearly unaware of his grandfather's arrival. At that moment, Jack noticed Frank's heavy suitcase and quickly showed him a trick all young people knew, pulling out the hidden handle as if performing magic. But what seemed like the simplest thing in the eyes of the young appeared clumsy and difficult when faced by an old man, because Frank had been carrying that heavy suitcase across half the United States. The changes of time had left them inevitably behind, just like smartphones that everyone could use. But in the hands of the elderly, even making a call became a challenge. At this moment, Jack told Frank that he was going to play games. Then he left, leaving Frank alone in the room to make himself comfortable. Looking at the prosperous life inside Amy's house, Frank thought his daughter should be living happily. When he went into the yard, he saw Amy walking while talking on the phone, and in that moment, Frank felt as if time had rewound, seeing his daughter once again as a carefree little girl. Amy had never imagined her father would come such a long way to see her. Faced with her father's sudden visit, Amy did not show the joy Frank had imagined. Instead, her face carried a trace of worry. As they talked and laughed, Amy seemed distracted. Her words carried a subtle avoidance. When Frank asked what Jeff was doing, Amy suddenly grew vague. Her hesitation made suspicion stir in Frank's heart. Not until nightfall did Jeff hurry home, looking flustered, carrying a gift, yet his face showed no trace of happiness. Frank was ready to greet him. Their time together was filled with a strange awkwardness, as if a thin veil separated them, both close and distant. Even the meeting between Jeff and Amy felt strange. Frank could not explain it at the moment, but he just felt something was odd. At dinner, the soft light shone across the table, yet it could not brighten the worry in Frank's heart. He confirmed the suspicion in his heart that there must be some conflict in his daughter's family, because when Amy asked her son to fetch the sauce for her husband, Jack rebelliously refused. Later, Frank expressed his wish to stay for a few more days, but Amy made excuses, saying she had no time. Her husband was busy with work, and her son had to attend tutoring classes. The atmosphere sank into embarrassment. But Frank did not mind her excuses. In his view, being able to see his daughter at all, even for just one short day, was enough to satisfy him. The next morning, Frank picked up his camera, took some photos of Amy's house, and then wanted to capture a family portrait as a keepsake. But their expressions were clearly not what Frank had hoped. His grandson refused to stand next to his father, and the three of them forced out smiles that looked stiff. Yet Frank did not care about that at the moment. What he cared about was his daughter's true feelings. He wondered why she was unwilling to share her troubles with him. Until the moment at the train station when they said goodbye, Frank finally summoned his courage and asked the question he had always wanted to ask. "Are you happy?"
Yeah, of course I am.
Then, Leaving behind the letter he had prepared for Amy, he turned and walked into the station. On the train, Frank stared blankly out of the window, and his state of mind had quietly changed. Before leaving, he was full of excitement, but after leaving, he was full of worry. First, his son David had vanished without a trace. Then his eldest daughter's family was not harmonious, and what he could not understand most was why his children refused to tell him any of it. Was it because they feared he would worry, or because they feared he would become a burden? After another few days of long travel, he finally arrived at the place where his eldest son, Robert, worked. His wife had once mentioned that Robert was now an outstanding music conductor, so Frank could not help but point at the poster of the conductor, asking passersby to take a picture of him in front of it. One photo was not enough. He took many in a row. He believed that with such a good career, his eldest son must surely be happy, and this expectation lit up Frank's heart. He even learned to pull out the handle of his suitcase, as if everything was moving toward his hopes, making his steps grow quicker without realizing it. Yet when he entered the concert hall full of joy, he found that the conductor on stage was not his son. His eyes searched the crowd in a rush, and finally he spotted Robert in a corner of the orchestra. Seeing his father suddenly appear, Robert's face revealed a trace of embarrassment he could not hide. It was the kind of emotion that mixed surprise and unease when a child faced a long-absent parent. So he put down his work and came toward his father. And in Frank's eyes, his son was still as mischievous and lovable as when he was a boy. When rehearsal ended, the reunion between father and son was not as warm as Frank had expected. Robert's voice carried hesitation as he slowly explained, saying the stories about him being the chief conductor were only things his mother had told Frank. He admitted he could indeed conduct and compose some music, but now he had chosen to be a drummer, traveling with the band to perform. This work gave him not only a decent income, but also a rare sense of freedom and satisfaction. Yet in Frank's heart, doubt arose, because in his mind, his son had completed higher education and should have a broader stage, not just settle for being a drummer. This gap stood like an iron door, blocking the space between his expectations and his son's reality. Frank also understood that continuing the topic would only make the atmosphere more awkward, so he chose to bury the disappointment in his heart, then told Robert that he wanted to stay a few days and spend more time with him. But Robert quickly stopped his father, saying that he was leaving for a performance in Europe that very evening, and he would depart that afternoon, so he could not stay. Hearing this, Frank could not hide the disappointment on his face, and then suggested going out with his son for some fresh air. When Robert stepped outside, he naturally prepared to light a cigarette, but Frank instinctively used his fatherly tone to stop him. This contradiction was the subtle and complex bond between father and son, a tug of education between authority and obedience. Then Frank agreed to let his son smoke, but the next moment...
Hi, Robert.
Hey, I just quit smoking.
Good job.
Thanks. I'm not quitting because you want me to. I'm quitting because I know you don't think I can. Just to make that clear, okay?
At this point, Frank seemed to feel that he had been too strict with his son, so he held back his emotions. Only those who have truly experienced deep conversations between father and son can slowly understand the delicate and complex emotions stirring within them at that moment. It was not that they did not love each other, nor that they intentionally sought each other's faults, but it was a family way of speaking that made them both hold something back. So after a silence, Robert finally chose to apologize to his father. Then came the moment of farewell, and Frank once again asked the question in his heart, "Are you happy?"
Happy? Yeah. I get paid to bang a big loud drum all day. Of course I'm happy.
Hearing his son's answer, Frank reached out his hand to say goodbye with a handshake, but instead, they wordlessly embraced, for they had been silent for far too long. Just as Frank was about to push the door open to leave, he could not help but look back. Before his eyes, his son was still as clever and lovable as when he was a child. Not good with words, but kind at heart. And no matter how the years might change, Robert would always be one of his most beloved children. On Robert's drum, he quietly left the third letter, then continued on his journey. Frank was going to see his last child, the daughter who lived farthest from home. But this time, Robert secretly told his sister about their father's visit. On the phone, the sister asked her brother why he didn't spend more time with their father.
I don't know what to say at all. Rosie,
What?
he's asking about David.
Okay, I won't say anything.
But Robert replied, after many more days of exhausting travel, Frank was already weary in body and spirit, but he suddenly remembered his promise to David, that he would call him soon. Yet when the phone rang, there was only the hollow sound of unanswered bells in the empty room, and Frank felt puzzled, not understanding why David had still not been heard from. That night, Frank continued waiting alone at the station, the surroundings silent and deserted. It felt as if the world had forgotten him there, leaving him only with loneliness. Fortunately, a staff member noticed him and came forward to ask, so Frank quickly showed his ticket and explained. But when the staff checked it, they discovered he had already missed his train. It turned out that during his journey across the country, his watch had fallen behind because of the time zone changes, which caused him to miss his departure. Helpless, he could only choose another means of transportation to continue his journey. But fate did not let this tired old man go so easily, for in the tunnel to the train station, he encountered a wanderer. He noticed the man was about the same age as his youngest son, David, and the young man coughed constantly. Perhaps because he thought of his own son, Frank felt pity, and without hesitation he took out some money and handed it over, hoping the young man could buy food to ease his hunger in the cold for a while. But the man did not even say thank you, so Frank spoke as if to his son, telling him he should say thanks, which angered the other. In the scuffle, Frank pushed the wanderer away, but his own medicine fell to the ground, medicine that was vital to him. After crushing the pills underfoot, the wanderer hurried away, while Frank did not have the strength to chase him, and he knew that even if he caught up, it would be useless. Without a doctor's prescription, he had no way to buy more medicine elsewhere, so he could only bend down and pick up the scattered fragments of the pills one by one from the ground. After gathering most of them, he went to a phone booth. His night had been full of misfortune, and he began to think of home, especially of his late wife. At that moment, only hearing her voice could bring him comfort. He dialed her number, and after no one answered, he finally heard the voicemail she had recorded when alive. "I'm not at home right now. Frank may still be in the garden. Please leave a message. I'll call back." Hearing this, Frank felt a bit of comfort in his heart. On the train, he carefully scraped together the remaining powder of the medicine and reluctantly swallowed it with water. Exhausted, Frank fell asleep on the train, and in his dream he saw his son David locked in prison. As if waking from a nightmare, he then arrived in Las Vegas. As soon as he stepped out of the station, he saw his daughter, and a sharp whistle pulled her back from her phone call. In her father's eyes, Rosie was still the same adorable child. To welcome her father, Rosie had specially rented a long luxury car, and this thoughtful gesture made Frank very happy. Now his youngest daughter was a well-known dancer in Las Vegas, living in a luxurious apartment, and she had even prepared a huge room for her father. Frank looked at the surroundings. Every detail showed his daughter's care, and he felt comforted. Perhaps his youngest daughter was the one among them truly living happily. In the middle of their conversation, the sound of the doorbell broke the joyful atmosphere. It was a neighbor standing outside holding a child. She said she had an urgent matter to attend to and hoped Rosie could look after the child for a while. Before Rosie could answer, Frank had already accepted the task, gladly offering to help her with the neighborly favor. Looking at the little baby before him, he suddenly remembered what his own children were like when they were young. That night, Frank shook out the last bits of medicine from his pocket, picked out the impurities, and swallowed it with water. Just then, the phone in the house suddenly rang, but Rosie was busy coaxing the baby to sleep and had no time to answer. Frank accidentally heard the message that came through the phone.
It's me. Look, I need the apartment back sooner than I thought. So call me.
Frank realized that his daughter Rosie's life, just like his other children, was not as perfect as it appeared. But instead of exposing this discovery, he blamed himself, thinking perhaps it was his own fault that had added so many burdens and troubles to his youngest daughter. So he decided not to stay any longer, planning to leave the next day, for just seeing his daughter once already made the trip worthwhile. Rosie wanted to keep him, but Frank's mind was made up, and besides, his medicine had run out. That evening they had a very simple dinner, but during the conversation Frank often drifted off, his eyes resting on Rosie, remembering that after all these years, she was still the same innocent girl, the little one who loved eating pasta. Frank finally asked the question that had long been on his mind. Why did the children tell their mother everything, yet never confide in him? Rosie gave the answer, saying that the reason they always shared joy but never sorrow was because Frank always pushed them to achieve, always reminding them of his own sacrifices and expectations, but never truly listening to their voices. Their late mother, on the other hand, had been better at listening and understanding. Rosie's words were like a revelation to Frank. Though deep down he had already suspected the answer, he still needed to hear it from his children. The next day, Frank began his journey home, this time choosing to fly, because without his medicine his condition could not support long travel. Before leaving, he no longer asked his youngest daughter if she was happy, because by now Frank already had the answer in his heart. Rosie silently watched her father's departing figure, her eyes shifting from warmth to sorrow, seeing the aged back of a man who had spent half his life working for his children, still waving stylishly to her as he left. Frank flew into the sky, but fate still had not let go of this old man. Theoretically, he could make it home before the medicine wore off, but during the flight they encountered a thunderstorm. The turbulence of the plane combined with his need for medicine caused his illness to return. He endured the pain and tried to reach the restroom to splash cold water on his face. But the suffering had already pushed his body past its limit, and he slowly fell unconscious. In a haze, he felt he was dreaming, back to the time when his children had not yet grown up. The children sat beside him, and he asked them why. Even though they were not living well, they still lied to him. Although they had hidden it carefully, he had already noticed the clues. Through every small detail of their behavior, Frank had sensed their lies. Amy's marriage was not as happy as it seemed. It had even reached the point of divorce. He noticed Jeff went to work the next day wearing the same clothes as yesterday, a sign of separation. And that evening he had only been called over to act the part. Robert's so-called performances across the world were nothing more than a fabrication because Frank had seen the band's poster, clearly showing the venue was local, nowhere near the European tour Robert had claimed. Even his most obedient daughter Rosie had hidden the truth from him. The baby she was caring for was actually her own, and the woman she called a neighbor was in fact her partner, because the baby did not cry around Rosie, but instead showed closeness and comfort. As for David, his whereabouts remained hidden until the end, leaving Frank completely in the dark. The more Frank thought, the angrier he became, because clearly his children faced so many troubles, yet none of them told him, and he could not pretend nothing had happened. His wife had left suddenly, entrusting the children to him, but now he did not know how he could answer to her. Although his children's paths were theirs to walk, Frank could not stop worrying for them. At that moment, heavy rain began to fall, and the dream dissolved into it. On the hospital bed, Frank slowly opened his eyes, and what he saw were the children who never had time to reunite, all except David. Frank could not help but ask where David was, but the children were vague and hesitant. In his heart, Frank already guessed the truth, and he needed to face it, so he pressed them again for David's whereabouts. Under their father's persistence, Amy finally spoke the truth. David is gone 9 months ago. That is the truth. It turned out that in these years, David's life had not gone well. He always wanted to be his father's pride, but the cruelty of reality crushed him, and after their mother's passing, he never recovered from the grief. In his deep despair, he turned to forbidden substances, and in the end, he lost his life because of them. The children had hidden it only to protect Frank, not wanting him to suffer the agony of losing a son, guarding the truth in silence. Frank could hardly endure this fact. He did not want to believe it. At last he realized how harsh he had been, and how much pain his strictness had caused his children. As night fell and he drifted in and out of sleep, his thoughts returned to David's childhood. Then Frank woke, and he understood that his son had never truly left, that love had never faded. Frank finally realized that his expectations had been too narrow. He understood now that his children's happiness was not confined to the framework he had imagined. What mattered most was that they were truly happy. Not wanting to be an artist, being a house painter was fine. Marriage did not have to be perfect. Being only a drummer in a band was also fine. Loving someone of the same gender was not a mistake. What mattered was living happily. After leaving the hospital, Frank carried his endless longing for David to the gallery, wanting to buy his son's painting as a keepsake. But the clerk told him the work had already been sold, so Frank turned and left. That David's painting had been loved by others meant he had succeeded, and Frank felt comforted. Just then the clerk chased after him, having guessed from his name that he was David's father. She brought out another painting left in the storeroom, one David had once said was his favorite, a piece he had called Not for Sale. When the canvas was revealed, Frank's tears poured out, his heart overwhelmed by a storm of emotions. Because the scene in the painting, those rows of wires, looked ordinary, but the hidden meaning in the painting was his father. This painting was also David's reflection and expression of his father's love. They represented the strength of a father who had raised him and helped him grow. When Christmas came again, Frank no longer asked his children to return home. He had learned to let go. But when he returned home from shopping, all the children were already there. This holiday seemed the same as every other, yet it was different in every way. As a father, Frank had always believed his expectations were the right direction for his children, but he forgot that such love was too heavy, teaching them to hide their troubles and building an invisible wall. Because they knew that parents could not help, they would only lose sleep at night. In this world, there may be no perfect empathy, but parents are an exception. They always magnify our pain 100-fold, and such overwhelming concern can make family love suffocating. A hometown is not just a piece of land, but a vast state of mind. And what shapes that state of mind is the blood bond of family. Family love is not a perfect fairy tale, but a practice of staying close through hardships. True family love is learning to let go while still watching over, not a suffocating control. When parents learn to cherish the present like water in their hands, and when children understand the meaning of loss, only then can both sides realize that family is not an accessory of life, but the source of strength against the desolation of the world. And in middle age, what truly determines the quality of life is family. Always remember, sitting with loved ones by the light of home is more meaningful than gaining the whole world. When you give your child a smile, he gives you a son. When you give your partner a hug, they give you an entire spring, and that is the truest treasure in this life.